For the 100th time this season, we need to talk about the tropics, as we could see a tropical storm or even a hurricane develop in the Caribbean Sea as we go into next week. And if this does form, there is a chance it goes towards the Gulf of Mexico. It also could go out to sea or even impact areas like the Greater Antilles. So we need to talk about this today and kind of give you an idea of what the potential scenarios are if something does end up developing. Let's begin with what's happening, though, across the entire Atlantic Ocean right now. And for the time being, things are actually relatively quiet. You'll notice that there's really nothing happening in the Caribbean Sea right now, and the reason why is because it's dry. It's actually very dry right now, which is going to kind of help to limit development over the next 5 to 7 days, which is hence why we don't yet have a National Hurricane Center outlook for this next area we are going to be watching for. However, this area, as we go into early November, is going to be a very primed environment for hurricane development, with very low wind shear and also very high oceanic heat content, which means that we are probably going to see something attempt to develop as we go into early November. You will notice a bit further to the north of that, we do have a trough that is spinning just to the north of Bermuda. That is moving actually into Nova Scotia this morning, which there will be some rain in those areas. Back over in the lower 48, the only area of any sort of disturbance right now in the entire United States is back over in the Midwest. That is mostly just some passing showers and thunderstorms. And look at this thing way over to the left side of your screen in the Pacific Ocean. That is actually Hurricane Christy. And yesterday, this was actually a Category 5 hurricane in the Pacific Ocean. And this is the first Category 5 that we've seen this year. Very impressive eye as well. This was earlier yesterday, by the way, around about 2-3 o'clock. That's when it peaked around the Category 5 intensity, but very impressive hurricane nonetheless. And it is now weakening as it continues to move west in a sheared environment and also in an environment where the water temperatures are much colder. Let's get the confetti cannons out, because guess what? We have no tropical cyclone development expected over the next 7 days in the Atlantic Ocean. But again, what we're talking about in today's forecast is something that's expected to start to develop just around or after the end of this time frame. And you'll kind of see what we're talking about more in detail here in just a moment. Now, here's what the current thinking is. As we go into early November, we are going to be watching the Caribbean Sea. That's going to be mainly anywhere from Cuba back to the east towards the Lesser Antilles for some sort of tropical cyclone development. Now, it's not a guarantee that we are going to see something develop. However, it is a unseasonably favorable environment right now in the Caribbean Sea, where we have, again, low wind shear, high oceanic heat content that's available, basically meaning the water temperatures are very warm right now, especially for this time of the year. We're basically looking at an environment that's more typical for early October, and we are heading into early November. So this is something that's a little bit strange for this time of the year, but overall, it's very warm out there. And in addition to that, we are also expecting a lot of moisture in this area as we go into early November. So we think that we are going to end up getting a Central American gyre storm. Essentially what that is a broad area of low pressure spin that's over Central America and as well as parts of Mexico. And usually what happens is that we get these little tropical cyclones that try to develop just to the east of that. And we've had this happen several times this year. One of the more notorious ones was Hurricane Helene that ended up going into Florida. Now, I'm not saying this exact storm, if it develops, it'll go into Florida, but you kind of get the idea here. We've actually seen this happen several times this year. In case you think I am making up this potential development area, I'm actually not. The Global Hazards Outlook from the Climate Prediction Center does outline from October 30th until November 5th, which is around Halloween, and just after that, a medium chance of development in the Caribbean Sea for tropical cyclone activity. So again, this is something that we do think is a possibility. Here's the thing. We are still several days out from development, and we are still several days out from seeing any sort of low pressure system in the Caribbean Sea. But if something develops, it could be big. That is why we're talking about it in today's video, and we're going to go over the scenarios of where it could go here in just a moment. I also want to point out, even beyond this point, by November 6th to 12th, we could still see another area of development try to, make its way out in that little CAG region in the Caribbean Sea and in the southwestern Atlantic Ocean. Now, let's talk more about the possible scenarios of where this tropical cyclone will go if it ends up developing. And to look at that, we're going to look at the GEFS ensemble members. What this essentially is a group of ensemble members that can kind of show you the intensity and as well as the track of where they think the system will go with different initial conditions and also different parameterizations. So we are going to begin with the next few days. Monday and Tuesday of next week, we're not really expecting any development by then. What we think is going to happen is either Wednesday or Thursday of next week, we'll start to get a broad area of low pressure in the Caribbean Sea. You'll notice all these different red numbers. Those are all pressure numbers, the last two digits of pressure, and almost all of them are showing at least some sort of low pressure center. If not, there's only a couple outliers that actually already have a hurricane. by Halloween, which I don't think will happen, but I think we're at least going to have a broad area of low pressure sometime during the middle or end of next week, and so we might see a National Hurricane Center outlook sometime here in the next couple of days if this trend continues. As we go into Halloween and eventually into November 1st, you'll notice that several different ensemble members do show hurricane intensity, if not at least tropical storm intensity here in the Caribbean Sea. And notice how it's just south of Cuba and also just to the southwest of Haiti in the Dominican Republic. By November 2nd and 3rd, most of the ensemble members are spread apart substantially. Some of them are as far north as southern Florida, and then some of them are as far south as like east of, Belize or something like that here in parts of the southern Caribbean Sea. So there's a large 300-mile range essentially north to south and even west to east where the system could be. So that's where one of the biggest uncertainty points currently is. We don't exactly know if something develops where it'll even be at this point sometime around November 2nd. By November 3rd, 4th, and 5th, you'll notice this big orange blob is essentially where the majority of the ensemble members are, and a lot of them show intensity anywhere from just a normal low pressure system all the way up to a category 3 hurricane. It's a pretty large range as of right now with these ensemble members, but just notice how spread apart they are. Again, they're in a very large area. Now notice there are several of them near Florida, but I want to kind of remind you here that we don't exactly know what is going to happen yet, but we do want to let you know that if you're in Florida, just stay weather aware. Just be watching this as we go into early November, because I do think this will be something to watch for. And eventually, as we get closer to election day, several of the ensemble members are still very split apart. I mean, again, we have some members way over to the east of the Lesser Antilles and then some back over here in the southeastern Gulf of Mexico. Again, there's a very large spread, but essentially the potential scenarios with this development will depend on, one, where it actually develops, because it could develop anywhere really in the Caribbean Sea. If it develops further west, I think there's a better chance it actually could go into the southeastern Gulf and maybe go towards Florida. There's also a possibility that develops more in the central Caribbean Sea and kind of heads more over to the north and eventually northeast out to sea. And there's also a chance it goes more up the coast. It could also just go out to sea more to the east. Again, there's a lot of different scenarios. We don't exactly know what's going to happen yet, but again, I want to remind you that it is still important that we talk about this. The National Hurricane Center has not yet put out an outlook, which I agree with right now, because I don't think we're going to see development in the next 5 or 6 days, maybe around Halloween or just after that. But a lot of people right now, hurricanes are kind of at the back of their mind now as we go later into fall, and we're heading into November. November is not a month that a lot of people think about hurricanes, so I do think it's important to at least talk about this, just so people are still aware that hurricane season is not over yet. We still have a few more weeks until it's officially over, which again ends on November 30th. Also, one thing I do want to talk about is the GFS model. This is a deterministic model, and again, I want to remind you, do not base your forecast off of one single computer model. You may have seen this type of image on Twitter or Facebook, whatever social media platform you're on. You might have seen this where there is a major hurricane heading into Florida on November 6th, which is right around Election Day. Again, notice that 958 millibar low pressure center, but if you look at the most recent GFS model run that has just come out, you'll notice how much further to the east it has this hurricane. Now, obviously, it's still close to Florida, but again, there's no, science in forecasting a hurricane 10 plus days out from making landfall anywhere in the United States, even if we had a low pressure center. And without a low pressure center, it makes it even harder to forecast. So I just want to remind you, if you see one single graphic on social media that shows, a big hurricane hitting Florida, it's most likely just to get clicks. There's really not much else to it. For the record, I'm not saying it is not going to happen. I'm just saying that there's, again, just no science really in forecasting 10 plus days out where a hurricane could even make landfall. With all that said, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe down below and click the bell icon down below so you're notified with the latest updates, as we will continue to keep you posted with the latest if anything does develop here. A quick reminder, there's only 6 days left until the 500,000 subscriber merch is gone forever from shopmaxvelocity.net. If you want to get any of the merch, like a sticker, a mug, or even a t-shirt, hat, or beanie, again, this is one of your last chances to do so. It's the top link in the description below at shopmaxvelocity.net.